You guys all ready? Ready? I think I'm ready finally. So, I'd just like to read through this in the way of reviewing what we covered this morning and then go on to this afternoon's topic. So, this was The New Humanity and Social Formulations. In a number of his major messages to the world, such as those during his early Western tours in the 1930s, Meher Baba addressed himself to a world in crisis. Plainly, he represented himself as the avatar of the age, as providing the solution to social problems dividing and rending the world. What prescriptions and formulas did Meher Baba offer relating to the social order? In early messages to the West, and by the way, those 6 messages are all there. I don't have a copy of the book, but Early Messages to the West has those 6 messages, which he gave in 1932. And major discourses such as The New Humanity, Meher Baba consistently traced problems in the social sphere back to their root in selfishness. Collective problems result from egoism and selfishness extending itself, for example, through the selfish pursuit of material desires, or self-identification with limited groups based on race, nationality, etc. Ultimately, society can be redeemed only if the individual heals and transforms himself. But this can be accomplished only through the mercy of God and the grace of the perfect Master. From the beginning of his avatar mission until the end, Meher Baba consistently declined to involve himself in politics, and he discouraged his followers from doing so. Plainly, a society must provide for its own self-governance, yet Meher Baba declined to give specific recommendations as to how this should be done. We didn't really get to this morning. I was going to bring up Aristotle's 6 types of government and everything like that. But I don't see where Baba ever gave an indication what form of government was best. Even in his discourse, The New Humanity, it doesn't pick up that topic. Meher Baba seems further to have given certain critiques of values highly prized in modern political culture, such as freedom and equality. Actually, he says several things about equality. I wish we had had time to talk about it. But in brief, he seems to indicate that the true value, of which that is a kind of a lesser indication, is oneness. Oneness is what really should be the goal. Transcend. Actually, in his discourse on the 3rd discourse of the ego, he talks about the superiority complex and the inferiority complex. And he talks about equality as kind of a temporary moment perched between the two. So you kind of have to go beyond that dichotomy altogether. That would be a full topic to discuss. I had a lot of stuff on it, but we didn't get to it. Why he did so, and what higher perspectives he wished to bring into view are matters well worth exploring. Probably the most important presentation of Meher Baba's vision for the future on a worldwide scale can be found in his discourse, The New Humanity. Whether or not this essay provides what we could call a blueprint for the future social order, it certainly enunciates major themes. This vision of the future, which the Avatar presents, is indeed a bright one, a source of consolation in an age of crisis and despair. And I've noticed in reading about the lives of the whole last bunch of avatars, going back at least to Krishna and maybe Ram, I don't know, that all of them had very bleak pictures of the future, of what was to come. Jesus certainly did, and Muhammad, there was the Judgment Day coming, and Buddha and Krishna, all did. And Meher Baba is the first avatar in a long time to give a very bright picture of the future. There's going to be a new humanity who's going to, he said when he comes back in 700 years, humanity will be at its spiritual apex. So the last bunch of avatars seem to have been right. So that's good news for us. Yeah.
But didn't, I thought Jesus talked to his people about expect the coming of the kingdom of God. Wouldn't that be a positive kingdom?
But it seemed like it would be after some sort of a catastrophe, isn't that the picture given? And I think for Moses too, actually. Not Moses, Muhammad also. And in the Indian cosmological account, the Kali Yuga, after bottoming out, yields to a Satya Yuga, a golden age, so to speak. So for all of them, there's light at the end of the tunnel. But Meher Baba seemed to indicate the new humanity was going to come. Like that's not way in the future, but not all that far away. So this afternoon, our topic is the heart and the head. And
My favorite.
why don't I read this out right from the start? I have these whole big things I did for Mayarana, detailed, and I have all these study questions and everything else, where we went into these matters. In our analysis, in Mayarana, we looked briefly, I'll be looking again in a minute, at those layers and sheaths that constitute the false self. In our analysis, the layers and sheaths of the ego is represented in Chart 2, the divine theme. Though we find the intellect, we do not find anything called heart. Why not? What is the heart? What is its place in the structure of the false self, or ego? In certain discourses, Meher Baba associates the gross, subtle, and mental spheres with lust, greed, and anger. We'll be looking at that in a minute. This is asking, what is the heart? The mind wants to know. And these, he says, vitiate body, heart, and mind. That lust, greed, and anger vitiate body, mind, and heart. Heart and mind, respectively. This implies a three-tiered homology. On the other hand, in God Speaks, Baba associates the fifth plane with thoughts and the sixth with feelings. Yet perhaps the most important discussion appears in 3 Incredible Weeks. Do you happen to know that book, 3 Incredible Weeks? It's actually a rather important book, I would say.
Is that little pamphlet?
It's more than that, but it's about 80 or 100 pages.
Really? Who has it?
It was published by Shariar. Do we have it here?
It's out of print.
It is out of print. We have the DVD though. But
That's not the same though.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
You know, the 3 Incredible Weeks period was in September of 1954,
yes.
when a whole bunch of Westerners came to be with Baba for what they call 3 Incredible Weeks. Darwin Shaw, Francis Brabazon, Bill LePage,
Charles Purdom,
25 or 30 of them. And that culminated in Baba's message, the final declaration. And at that event, I think Charles Purdom and Malcolm Schloss were given the job of doing a write-up of the discourses Baba gave during that period, which they did. Actually, Malcolm Schloss died the very day after he got back to America, after that occasion. So that book is there, and I really would, it's one of the unrecognized books of major importance, I would say. Just Baba's discourses over that period. And that's where he has this, where Baba identifies the heart with the antakarana and the mind with manas. I'm sure that totally answers the question for you. Antakara and manas. Got it. Carol is sort of just a piece of cake.
Right. Right there with you.
What's that?
I'm right there with you.
You're right. All right. All these passages need to be brought into interrelation if we are to form a precise idea of what Baba meant by mind and heart. A related topic is the dichotomy of spirit and matter, discussed most fully in the discourse, The Life of the Spirit.
Oh.
Baba seems to indicate that mind is the faculty best suited for the engagement with matter and the material, while heart is the faculty best able to penetrate and intuit the spirit.
Wow.
That's one place to go. Another place to go on this topic. The Avenues of Understanding provides one of the most explicit treatments of mind and heart in Meher Baba's literary oeuvre. You know the word oeuvre is collected writings. It's a horrible word applied to Baba, but so is philosophy and practically every other word in English language. Conflicts between mind and heart arise, Baba says, when the mind tries to encroach upon the heart's natural domain. Heart can discern ends. Heart can determine what has value. Mind, for its part, can negotiate the means of achieving those values once the heart has identified what they are. The spiritual life is best achieved when heart and mind function harmoniously, each playing its proper role and each fulfilling and complementing the other. The significance of mind and heart might be further explored through the study of Gyan and Bhakti Yoga. Do you know what Gyan Yoga is?
Discrimination.
Discrimination, knowledge. Gyan is like knowledge. It's one of the great yogas in India. And Bhakti means devotion.
Emotion.
And in its higher reaches, Bhakti would be love. And it's the ritualism and worship is Bhakti in its lower aspect, and pure love for God is Para Bhakti, higher Bhakti. Bhakti or devotion becomes the expression of, this is a quote where Baba talks about the three yogas. Bhakti or devotion becomes the expression of truth through feeling. The way of knowledge, Gyan, becomes the assimilation of that same truth through understanding. The heart is featured in Bhakti Yoga and the mind in Gyan.
Can you talk a little bit about this? Really profound. This one, the way of bhakti or devotion becomes an expression of truth through feeling, and the other one through understanding.
Yeah, we'll come to that.
Okay.
I had this is
Sure.
at the end of the discussion. Yeah, I want
Okay.
to try to get to that. This is a summary of a lot of some
Oh,
of
I
what we'll
see.
be covering this afternoon. Now, so the first topic here, I didn't have time to write an outline on the board. I
Do
don't
you
know.
want chair? Regular chair?
This is fine.
This
I just
is
have
fine.
to get down there, get the slideshow changed. Yeah, some rude group of singers kept impeding.
Oh, yeah.
So I couldn't get the album written.
It was that keyboard.
Minor detail.
The keyboard player, yeah,
Keyboard.
somebody should really,
You wouldn't give it up.
he wouldn't give up. Yeah, bring that guy's neck. Okay. So we looked at this a little bit the other day. Now, here's the question I'd like to ask. This is really a case of the mind and intellect trying to figure out what the heart is. But let me just ask the question. Baba talks about heart. What is it? And the funny thing is, it's very hard to find a clear definition in Baba's discourses. Yeah. So
We
that,
know it's an unfathomable place where God resides. That's that.
okay, that's good. So I'd like to look at several different places where Baba talks about that as helping to inform this idea. And the funny thing is that when Baba does give us a real psychology, in fact, let's look at this right now. How many of you were here last week when we looked at this a little bit? Okay, most of you, yeah. This is Baba's most developed analysis, Meher Baba's most developed structural psychology, call it that. That is to say, analyzing the structure of the false self or the psyche. And these are the layers. We went through this last week. The center, S is at the center. And remember what S means?
Soul.
That's right. And then we have consciousness, the next layer. These are all layers of consciousness. This red one here is seat of individuality. This black one here is sanskaras. This red one here is intellect. This black one here is the mental body. This one here, black and red, is the subtle body. And this outermost one is the gross body. Those are the rings or layers that comprise you and me. Except for those of you who are on the subtle mental plane. If you're subtle, this is you. If you're mental, that's you. I don't know if there are any perfect masters in attendance. You'll just have to get to the book and look at, I don't have here, a picture of the perfect master. Now, when I go through this, one thing that I'm struck by, where is the heart? It ain't there, is it? Isn't that funny? And here he gives this big developed analysis of the false self and never sticks the heart in. But he does stick the intellect in. So maybe Baba was in a very heady mood when he made this chart. No, I just find it's interesting. He talks mind and heart is so big when he's sort of urging his lovers on towards love. But when he actually gives an analysis, he didn't indicate where it would be. That's the first question I just want to be asking about all of this. I'll be coming back to this a little bit later. But here are some of the things that he did say that seem to pertain to this subject. Okay. Lust, greed, and anger. I've tried to pick topics for these different sessions that are interrelated. One of them is truth and values, and on the other half of that you have falsehood and values. And false values are created by desires. And the ones that he mentions the most are these three. Okay. Now here he gives a further discussion. Lust is lust, greed, anger. I don't need to talk about what those are. If there are any of you who don't know, I bow down to you. Okay. Someone want to read this out? The chief forms?
The chief forms in which the frustrated ego finds expression are lust, greed, and anger. Lust is very much like greed in many respects, but it differs in the manner of its fulfillment, which is directly related to the gross sphere. Lust finds its expression through the medium of the physical body and is concerned with the flesh. It is a form of entanglement with the gross sphere. Greed is a state of restlessness of the heart, and it consists mainly of craving for power and possessions. Possessions and power are sought for the fulfillment of desires. Man is only partially satisfied in his attempt to have the fulfillment of his desires, and this partial satisfaction fans and increases the flame of craving instead of extinguishing it. Thus, greed always finds an endless field of conquest and leaves the man endlessly dissatisfied. The chief expressions of greed are related to the emotional part of man. It is a form of entanglement with the subtle sphere. Anger is the fume of an irritated mind. It is caused by the thwarting of desires. It feeds the limited ego and is used for domination and aggression. It aims at removing the obstacles existing in the fulfillment of desires. The frenzy of anger nourishes egoism and conceit, and it is the greatest benefactor of the limited ego. Mind is the seat of anger, and its expression are mostly through the activities of the mind. Anger is a form of mental entanglement. Lust, greed, and anger, respectively, have body, heart, and mind as their vehicles of expression.
Okay. So what this seems to give us is this. I made this chart. it seemed lust, greed, and anger, and lust's arena is the body, greed is the heart, and anger is the mind. And those seem to be correlated with gross, subtle, mental. Right? That's what I gathered from that. So, this all, what do you think about this? I mean, I'm sort of puzzling on it myself. Why is greed related to the heart? I don't have a quick answer.
I think that if a heart wants to be loved, that it can't get enough.
So it's greed he wants to possess. You know.
Never satisfied.
I suppose, you want security, you want comfort, so you want money.
Just
Power.
just assurance that whatever the money and the power won't go away. I don't have to have it, but I'm in it.
Yeah, want to have it around you. Greed, Baba seems to associate greed, power craving with greed. It's not just money, but it's power too. Well, that makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
You also mentioned, you said power craving. I was thinking the greed, when I look at greed and heart, I think of longing.
Right. Because he does associate actually longing with the subtle sphere in his discourse on love and makes that connection. So longing would be, in its better aspects, the higher form of what in a lower form is greed. It does seem to be pretty obviously true that lust is associated with the body, right? Sexual desire. I don't know whether gluttony, he doesn't talk about gluttony very much, but it's a physical craving. It would seem to fall into the same general thing. Baba never seemed to exhibit all that much concern about it. But the thing about lust is that it's kind of intermittent. That is, you have such physical cravings, and then when you satisfy them, they go away for a while, but then they come back after a period of time. Whereas the cycle of greed and anger seems a bit different. You can go on being angry for a long time without intermission, it seems like to me. So that's a difference. And greed too, would you say, is not satisfied in the same way?
Lust, I think, would be more easily satisfied, but it wouldn't last as long.
Yeah, that's right. You desire to have sex, and you do. And then, after you get recharged, you forget about it then for a bit. But then you get recharged and you want to do it again.
Not for very long.
Confession.
As you get older, the period of time.
No.
Yeah. So here's one thing Baba has to say about heart. He seems to associate it with the subtle, and he seems to associate it with greed. I'm a little puzzled by this because elsewhere he makes different sorts of connections. By the way, the word dil, is that used in Persian to mean something like, it refers to the liver, right? Dil.
It means heart.
It means the heart?
Yes.
Is it used with the same, literally the heart is an organ that pumps blood. But in, English usage, it means the center of feeling. It means the same thing
in Persian, when we talk about death, it's implies that.
So when Esfandiar referred to the death,
Yes. Constantly heart.
Yeah, the feeling center.
And it seemed like when Esfandiar make reference to the Dale, it went deeper. It went deeper into the core of the being than the heart.
Yeah. And I would think Baba's use does that also. Anyway, this is one bunch of connections Baba makes between these three desires. But here are then I'm just exploring different places where Baba has talked about matters that would seem to be relevant to this. Okay, I won't go here just yet, but I could bring up another whole slide, but it would take too long. What about the heart and intuition? Do you think there's a connection there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Aaron?
I think the intuition is what communicating from the heart.
Mm-hmm. What do you all, yeah? Those.
Well, and Baba said the voice of intuition is my heart.
My voice within. There does seem to be a link. Yeah. To speak, if one were to say intuition is the heart, in that case, I would raise this question. That we haven't had time to really study the ego, in a longer treatment. We could go into it more.
Next year.
To do it next year. But Baba talks in various places. I'll use the word Chaitanya, that circle, that kosha in the structure of the 12 self. When you're in plant, animal form, it's instinct. When you're a gross conscious human being, it's intellect. And on the higher planes, at the beginning, it's intuition. That would seem to suggest that intuition is the intellect at a higher level of development. I can't say that I believe that heart is reason or intellect at a higher level of development. It seems to me they're different things. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would have a hard time believing that intuition is heart. Maybe when you are functioning through your heart, you use the intuition more. Yeah.
I misquoted Baba. He said the voice of intuition is my voice.
My
Sorry
voice.
about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, Ward, it seems that I seem to feel good about it, or I agree with you, because it goes back to understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So the higher level of intellect being intuition is also has to do with, because intuition, it could be more related to understanding than feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Although in the probably common language or like conversational language, it's vice versa. It
Yeah.
usually equates to feeling. So I have a feeling that this happened, I have a feeling, like that, people say.
Did any of you go to any of Don Stevens' seminars on intuition?
Wow.
Did he take this up? The relation between heart and intuition?
I think he did.
I'd like to know what he came to.
I think there will be part of it in his book under the title of Intuition.
Yeah.
You have it in the library.
Bookstore, we have
Yeah,
a
Well,
library.
maybe I don't know if I've read that.
I haven't read it.
At present, I'm inclined to feel that intuition and heart have a significant relationship to each other, but I have a hard time believing that they're the same thing. Intuition is more like a mode of knowing, and heart is more like a actual part of your mind or psyche or false self, something like that.
Yeah.
Part of what I've been trying to do with some of these topics, especially this one, is just to spread the table with some relevant materials from Baba's Discourses, because I don't myself haven't worked out all the answers to it, of course. But intuition is another relevant thing to bring up when we're talking about mind and heart.
How about heart transplants? People who are transplanted heart. What happens then?
Yeah. Has anyone had a heart transplant?
Not yet, at least.
We could test this. Get a heart transplant and see whether your intuition changes.
I don't know. The heart is not just simple.
Yeah,
It's a symbol.
it's a symbol. Yeah, Baba very clearly. In fact, we'll be looking at a passage where Baba does very clearly.
It's not the physical part.
Not the physical heart.
With the one with the valve and blood.
But for some reason, people keep using that organ.
That's right.
I don't know. We aren't going into it, but in Kundalini Yoga, there are 7 chakras.
Yes,
And the 4th is the Anahata, or heart chakra.
yes.
Whether that has a correspondence, I really don't know enough about.
And they always do like that. Always do like that.
Maybe that's correlated too. That'd be another place to go in exploring this topic. But another important connection to be made is with the 5th and 6th. If any of you can remember that far back in your spiritual development. I'll read a little bit of this and I may skip some things. With greater involution of consciousness of the subtle conscious human soul in the 4th plane, consciousness of the subtle conscious human soul identifies itself with mind of the mental planes and experiences the mental world. This mind of the mental planes has 2 sections. In the first section, the state of mind is inquiring or reflecting. I always find that interesting, reflecting.
Reflect.
This is 5th plane now. In this state, mind functions as thoughts, high thoughts, low thoughts, good thoughts, bad thoughts, material thoughts, spiritual thoughts, and so forth.
Can we give an example between reflecting first and second?
Do you have anything?
We don't.
I mean, I think if we're reflecting on this topic, what is the heart? That would be thoughts,
Okay.
reflections, looking at something, turning in. Thoughtfulness would be reflectiveness.
Yeah.
You know, a better form of it. So. And the second part, the state of mind is, and look at these 2 words, I find them interesting, impressive or sympathetic. What do you think about that? What does impressive mean?
Versus expressive, is it?
Yeah, maybe not, is it? Impressive means you easily take impressions, right? And that would be related to sympathetic, would it not? If you're very sympathetic, you quickly take the impression of the person you're being sympathetic towards. It's an interesting characterization of the 6th plane, where you're seeing God face to face. In this state, mind functions as feelings. And by the way, he doesn't use the word emotions,
Yeah.
but feelings. Yeah, it comes in. Feelings of sufferings, emotions, feelings of desires, longings, feelings of pains, separation, and so forth. And he does mention, and I don't know if I'll instantly find it. Okay, this mental world has 2 domains: the domain of the 5th plane of consciousness of thoughts, and the domain of the 6th plane of consciousness of feelings. And he says on this page that on the 5th plane, the soul in the 5th plane can have control over the thoughts of others. But then he says, this is misunderstood sometimes as control over the minds of others. It's not control over the minds, but control over the thoughts. And on the next page, he talks about people in the 6th plane can have control over the feelings of others. This is sometimes misinterpreted as control over the hearts of others. It's not over their hearts, but just over their feelings. So why he makes that distinction, I've never fully understood. But a place to go with this, then, is when he's talking about these 2 sections of mind. The first is mind and the second is heart. What do you think about that?
You mean the second section?
The second section of mind is impressive or sympathetic, where mind functions as feelings.
Yeah.
And the first is where mind functions as thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm inclined on the balance to take this as corresponding to mind and heart on the whole. I'm not 100% sure.
Except it seems to be flipped over from the
The other way.
subtle to the mental.
I know, that seems really to
In
contradict
the
this.
previous formulation.
Yeah, where the subtle is hard and the mental is the mind, I know. I don't know quite what to do with that other thing. Maybe, take some meditating on it,
Some reflection.
some reflection on it. Yeah.
But you would still retain heart and going into the mental planes, correct? So the heart doesn't go away.
That's right.
So even if it's associated with the subtle plane, it's still going to function in the mental plane. It seems like you may be
Right.
explaining how it functions in the mental plane versus in the subtle.
That could be. Maybe the heart, even though its proper place is the second section of mind, has a special bearing on the subtle planes and feelings of greed or something. Maybe it's very active there or something like that. It would be good to explore that. I'd be interested to explore that. But he does associate heart with greed, and he associates the mind with anger. So we're talking about heart and mind. That's an important connection. Here is one other statement on this. Oops, it may be the most. Oh yes, this is. I wasn't going to show this, but since I saw it, I will. I was talking about Chaitanya, and this is. We did this last week. Can we take a look at this? Just to mention, this is the same kosha, the same layer of the self, develops from instinct, intellect, inspiration to intuition, to insight, to illumination, to realization. And that's why I'm disinclined to think of intuition as being the same thing as the heart, because that would imply that intuition is the same thing as intellect, but in a higher level of development. And I find that hard to believe. It seems that they're actually different things because they're very interactive in the human form.
You mean when you said they, you mean intellect and intuition?
Yeah. I mean, intellect, when it gets further developed, becomes intuition.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time believing that mind, when further developed, becomes heart. Doesn't sound like that.
Right.
So it sounds like they're different things. But here is maybe the most important treatment of this topic that I've ever found anywhere. And this is, in fact, I know it's hard to read. Sorry, I did my best. This was in India. I scanned it on the scanner there. So this is from 3 Incredible Weeks. Now, let's see. Lud asked what to do about the mosquitoes. Burning topic here in Los Angeles, I know. Let's hope it is. You get so much rain that you have to worry about mosquitoes.
That's right.
No, here we go. Okay. Could somebody read that out? Maybe a little hard to see, I know.
I can do that.
Okay, well, Aaron, why don't you have Aaron?
Yeah.
Christ and his inner circles and the Christian mystics all stress purity of heart. Muhammad and his imams also stress purity of heart. So did Zoroaster and the Magi's. So did Krishna and his companions and the Vedantas. So does Baba stress purity of heart. Today we shall see what this means, what the heart is, what the mind is. It is only the organ that is meant for something deeper. As Sufi said, the abode of love is infinitely higher than the domain of intellect. He alone out of the millions and billions of people can touch and kiss the threshold of the beloved who carries his life in his sleeves.
This is a couplet of Hafiz.
This is couplet of
Yeah.
This is the literal translation. What it means is that if you want to see your beloved God, you must go before him with your head in the palm of your hand. It means that the intellect can never attain to the one who transcends the mind. So we now understand that God cannot be understood. He is not visible because he is infinitely visible to the eye which has no veil of desires or of ego over it. The mind has a dual function which
So here we go. This is really getting to it. Yeah. Sorry.
The mind has a dual function which I have explained at length in God Speaks. The first function is that of thinking. The impressions that lie dormant have to be worked out so they appear as
Stand that.
thoughts. This thinking function of mind is known to the Vedantists as manas.
It seems like Baba is referring to that very portion of God Speaks that we were just reading. Even though God Speaks hadn't been published when he was saying this. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah. The second function of mind includes all feelings and emotions. This is called antakarana.
Antakarana. Yeah.
Antakarana. That means the heart. So what is known as the heart is actually the second functioning of the mind itself.
So that seems to me like a pretty clear explanation of it to me. So if that's the case, actually that the fifth plane is in fact the seat of mind and the sixth plane is the seat of heart. That's kind of where I would go with this. What do you all think? Does that seem
This type
right?
of thought is Baba. These words are Baba.
Yeah. So that would seem to imply to me.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
How about the infinite intelligence? Is there anything that to clarify more intuition and heart?
There really isn't very much. He just talks about intellect, inspiration. He doesn't even mention intuition. Yeah, infinite intelligence deals with other topics, but really not this one. There's a little bit in Tiffin lectures and those things, but I'm not... Let's go back to this. So if you look at this chart, maybe these two circles, which would be, okay, I'll look at these, the mental body and the intellect. Maybe that's what Baba meant by manas, or mind. And these two, the seat of individuality and sanskaras, maybe that corresponds to the antakarana, or the heart in its higher aspect. So when you're talking about purifying the heart, what has to be done is all those sanskaras have to be cleaned out, something like that. Anyway, this is what I'm able to do with this right now, just trying to figure out. Now, if that were the case, it would indicate that the mind, or manas, is the Indian word. I think I talked about this a little bit last week. Manas. You'll hear that a lot if you listen to bhajans. Meheramana arati sri. You know that one?
Yeah.
Mana, it's the same word. Manas is mind as the intellect working through the senses and the concepts formed on their basis. Like, I'm looking out at this room and I have sights and I hear sounds and smells and so forth. And I take all of them and I form them into concepts. Mahmoud, Ron, Margaret, and so forth. Table, screen. And it's Saturday. It's Los Angeles. All these concepts are part of the processing of all this information. So this part of my mind is dealing with the outer world. It's looking out. Whereas this part of my mind, the inner part, is more turned inwards towards the higher self. And if that's the heart is more oriented towards what's arising from within, and the mind is more oriented towards the external environment. That seems to me to correspond to the way that Baba uses mind and heart in some of his discourses. So this is where I can go with this at present. Any comments or suggestions or criticisms or thoughts from you all? We're asking what is the heart and what is the mind? I'm inclined to think mind is the intellect working through concepts and the senses. And heart is that deeper aspect that's aware of impulses and feelings arising from the wind within yourself. Now, Baba's general account of the heart and the mind, his discussions of it, usually focus on what their relationship should be. That's usually the matter he wants to attend to. So here's a, let me see where.
Well, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about this last week, but given the word heart is an English word and is kind of a metaphor into itself, is there a possibility that when Bob uses the word heart, it could be encompassing, linguistic concepts that are subtle but different?
Yeah, I know.
It's the same word in English could have subtle differences in Gujarati.
I know. I really think it's a real good question, and I wonder that too. In this, what we just read, he did give us those Sanskrit-based words, and I'm wondering whether that isn't what Baba had in mind, manas and antakarana. The only thing about that is that those are kind of highbrow words, and I don't know whether those would be the first things that would appeal to Baba. On the other hand, he might have been thinking of del. Would that be, is it a good word for English heart, do you think, Mahmood?
Yes.
Able.
Actually, quite often,
Yeah.
when in Farsi,
Yeah.
when we are talking about del, it is what we mean by that. And I'm very impressed by Ispandia. Almost always he was talking about del.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about mind?
So differences.
Is there a counterpart term? Del, we have mind and heart. Del, is there a counterpart term?
Then it would be
Or apple.
then.
Akal?
That not apple.
Actually, heart of is there.
No, because in that pocket of focus, when he says Mahome Ishra, that's the ball that's appleized.
Yeah.
I mean, the first one that she put in. Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Yeah, so Ron, I'm wondering that too. This is a topic that needs more research, for sure. I'm sure collecting some stuff. Now, here's one of the discourses. Sorry, we're so rushed. I didn't properly get it open before it started. Qualifications of the aspirant. There are a number of them where he talks about the respective roles of mind and heart. And I think this is a really, this is a really wonderful discourse on this. And I'd like to read a certain chunk of it, because it shows in the course of spiritual awakening how the exercise of mind and heart really do play a kind of a big role. Let's see. We won't read all of it, but he begins by talking about he uses the word shariat, or sharia, is how it's said. How do you say in Persian? Shariat? Or
Shariat versus
Shariat.
Tariqat.
Yeah. And that's a term in Islam for the external practices and doctrines of the Islamic religion. But Baba used it more generally as a generic term for external codes of belief and practice in any religion. We would use it for Christianity or Hinduism or anything. That's really what he means to be talking about here. So he's talking about how one begins at that level of things. But look at how, when you start to progress, this is a wonderful description of how mind and heart come into play at different times in different ways. The soul often spends several lifetimes in gathering the lessons of external conformity. It's a rather nice way of putting it, several meaning 4 or 5 million, something. 8,400,000 in human form. But there always comes a time when it tires of external conformity and becomes more interested in the realities of the inner life. When the worldly man takes to this higher kind of search, he might be said to have become an aspirant. like the insect. Okay, I'll read it. Like the insect which passes on through metamorphosis to the next stage of existence. He's thinking like a butterfly, caterpillar becoming a butterfly. The soul transcends the stage of external conformity. Shariat or karma kanda is the Hindu term. This would be the Islamic term. And enters upon the path of spiritual emancipation, i.e. tariqat or moksha marga. Tariqat, there's shariat, tariqat, marifat, and hakikat. Hakikat is truth itself. And moksha marga, do you know what moksha? Liberation. Mukti would be another
This
word
is
for it.
Hindi? Moksha Marga is Hindi?
Hindi, Gujarati,
Gujarati.
there are Sanskrit
Seems
derived
to be
words.
Sanskrit.
Yeah, so this will be the Hindu term for that.
Hindu term.
Baba likes to give terms in several languages for the same thing. In this higher phase, the soul is no longer satisfied by external conformity with certain rules, but wants to acquire those qualifications which make its inner life spiritually beautiful. Okay, sounds great. Now, how do you do it? Yes. From the point of view of the realities of inner life, the life of external conformity may often be spiritually barren, and a life which deviates from such rigid conformity may often be spiritually rich. In seeking conformity with established conventions and formality, a man is almost always prone to slip into a life of false or illusory values, rather than a life which is based upon true and lasting values. So like conventional religion, I would certainly do this. What is conventionally recognized need not always be spiritually sound. Okay, this is more unconventional values. Now, sometimes people stick to unconventional things for no other reason than they are out of the ordinary. This would be basically a reaction to shariat or conventionality. The unusual pursuit or interests enables them to feel their separateness and difference from others and to take delight in it. I'm sure you must have seen. Someone want to read? Let's read this out. We have a reader. Unconventional things.
Sure. Unconventional things also often generate interest merely through their novelty in contrast with conventional things. The illusory values of usual things become insipid through familiarity, and the mind then has a tendency, it's a little smaller, harder for me to read, then has a tendency to transfer the illusion of value to those things which are not usual instead of trying to discover true and lasting values.
So notice Baba's really focus is not just to reject convention because it's conventional, but to find true and lasting values. And mere reaction is really on the same level as conventional thinking would be. Keep going.
Transcending the stage of external conformity does not imply a merely mechanical and thoughtless change from conventionality to unconventionality. Such change would be essentially in the nature of reaction and could in no way contribute towards a life of freedom and truth. The freedom from conventionality, which appears in the life of the aspirant, is not due to any uncritical reaction, but is due to the exercise of critical thought.
So that's, Baba is, now this is a faculty of the mind, is it not? So it seems that one of the legitimate uses of the mind is in freeing oneself from the level of shariat or external conformity to codes. It does have a valid role to play here at this juncture.
You know, this reminds me of when I was in my late teens,
Yeah.
and I was telling my minister, I want something different. I need something different. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but it's got to be different.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was thinking just to be unconventional. I just
Right.
knew something was missing.
Right.
But it's just reminding me of that.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think a lot of people here have probably been through this experience one way or another.
Then I heard a Bob through my church.
Oh. So you asked your minister and the church answered.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I certainly went through this too, where, I was getting a certain philosophy of life, and I would think there are huge absurdities in this, or it doesn't answer the fundamental problems. So, the critical mind is very valuable here at this stage. Okay.
Is that why he calls critical thought?
I think this would be critical thought.
Would that be our seeking process, or are we're a seeker? Do we
Well-
do it through our thoughts or through?
Well, it has a role here in cutting one free from the bonds of conventional thinking. At least that's what he seems to be saying here.
Yes.
So, sometimes the attitude will be expressed that critical thought has no role at all to play. But I think that's definitely not true. It does have a role to play. Although we're going to see its limits in a minute. Want to keep going?
Those who would transcend the stage of external conformity and enter into the high life of inner realities must develop the capacity to distinguish between false and true values, irrespective of conventionality or unconventionality.
Right. Okay, here's where critical thought takes center stage.
Yes.
It does seem to play a big role at the start of the path, to me,
Yes.
for many people. Would you agree? Does that seem right to you? I've been getting taught this my whole life, but I can't believe it. There's something missing here. There's something fundamentally wrong. But it has to be a discrimination between true and false values and not just reaction. Okay, and here's where he says this. Do we have someone else who wants to read a little bit? All right.
Sam, you want to? The rise from Shariat or Karmakanda to Tarakat or Moksha Marga is not to be interpreted, therefore, as being merely a departure from external conformity. It is not a change from conventionality to idiosyncrasy, from the usual to the unusual, but it is a change from a life of thoughtless acceptance of established traditions to a mode of being which is based upon thoughtful appreciation of the difference between the important and the unimportant.
Now, we didn't really have the time to look at it here, but in the first discourse on Maya, these terms are central. Here's what false values are. There are three kinds, Baba said. Maya in values causes you to take the important to be unimportant.
Yes.
And causes you to take the unimportant to be important. And the third case is where you ascribe to something an importance other than the importance which it really has. And here are the three examples he gives. Taking the important to be unimportant. God is all important, and most people, most of the time, give nary a thought to God. The body is actually unimportant. It's necessary, Baba says that, but it's not inherently important at all. But people characteristically give it infinite importance. Saving your body is the most important thing. And for accrediting something with an importance other than the importance it really has, Baba uses the example of rites, rituals, and ceremonies. Because their importance is instrumental. Rites, rituals, and ceremonies are meant to serve as means to guide you to God, but people ascribe to them an importance in their own right, which they don't possess. So here he's going back to the same language. You know, when you read the discourses carefully, a lot of these key themes keep recurring between one discourse and another, and here's an example of that.
In the very same discourses that you talked about, in fact, I posted on Facebook this time, referring to your seminar, just to encourage people to tap into these Maya discourses.
Yeah.
And then he talks about even our life accomplishment, like the fact that we want to have education or get married or have this accomplishment, and
Right.
that becomes our goal, because those are really unimportant. We take it as important.
Yes.
Which is true. We all go through that.
Yeah. So, a thoughtful appreciation of the difference between the important and the unimportant. This is truth in values. Okay. It is a change from a state of implicit ignorance to a state of critical thoughtfulness. So again, this seems to me to be a purified function of the mind that he's talking about here. Want to go in, Carol?
Sure. It is a change from a state of implicit ignorance to a state of critical thoughtfulness. At the stage of mere external conformity, the spiritual ignorance of man is often so complete that he does not even realize that he is ignorant. But when the person is being awakened and enters the path, he begins by realizing the need for true light. In the initial stages, the effort to attain this light takes the form of intellectual discrimination between the lasting and the transitory, the true and the false, the real and the unreal, the important and the unimportant.
Okay. So this is the legitimate, valid use of the intellect. Right here at the start of the path.
Or,
Yeah.
why does the Shariat or Tariqat comes in here? Can we relate that to that?
It seems to be saying that the dissociation from the Shariat is, in that process, this intellectual discrimination between the lasting and the transitory, or critical thinking, plays a key role in enabling you to enter into the tariqat, or the inner life, or the path, the spiritual path. That's what I
Can you say that Tariqat could be a critical thoughtfulness?
I don't think tariqat would be critical thoughtfulness itself. I don't know. What do you all think? It's not. It's what enables you to enter into it.
In the source matter.
It's an essential tool. This is, I keep saying this, but this is illustrating the proper use of intellect, or a legitimate use of intellect, where intellect really is serving a good purpose. Okay, now he starts to talk about the limitations of that. Anyone else want to take us on a little bit here?
For the spiritual aspirant, however, it is not enough to exercise merely intellectual discrimination between the false and the true. Though intellectual discrimination is undoubtedly the basis for all further preparation, it yields its fruit only when newly perceived values are brought into relation with practical life. From the spiritual point of view, what matters is not theory but practice. The ideas, beliefs, opinions, views, or doctrines which a person might hold intellectually constitute a superficial layer of human personality.
Boy, I've often seen that. Isn't this true?
Yeah.
You know, people hold beliefs and then just change them when it becomes convenient.
Beliefs are skin deep.
They're skin deep, yeah.
Very often a person believes in one thing and does exactly the opposite. Part of it. The bankruptcy of barren beliefs is all the more pitiable because the person who feeds upon them often suffers from the delusion that he is spiritually advanced, when in truth he has not even begun spiritual life.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
You want to keep going? Yeah.
Sometimes even a wrong view, which is held with fervor, may indirectly invite an experience that opens out the gates to spiritual life. Even at the stage of Shariat or Karmakanda, allegiance to religions is not infrequently a source of inspiration for many selfless and noble acts. For while these dogmas or creeds are blindly accepted, they are often held with a fervor and enthusiasm which supply a dynamic element to the ideology which has been accepted by the person for the moment.
I think this is really describing a lot of what happens in religious culture and ideological culture. Just to reflect on this for a moment, one of the things which these dogmas and creeds, and that could be a religion, it could be a belief in some movement, there are all sorts of them. One of the things that they do give you is a basic, you can put your heart's passion into them. They actually can provide scope for the heart. And I think that's one of the reasons why they have so much appeal, actually. And why they can be so fervently followed, and why fanaticism can recruit so many people.
Yeah.
Would you think that's true? You can put your heart into it. If you can suspend the critical thinking of your mind, not look at its absurdities and contradictions and hypocrisies, it does give scope for the passion of the heart, and people do want that. So it seems to me that's a part of what he's explaining here. Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Dogmas and creeds, as compared with barren views and doctrines, have the distinct advantage of being embraced not only by the intellect, but also by the heart. They cover, in effect, a wider part of personality than pure theoretical opinions.
Yeah. So he's going to say right here that this is a problem that you often run up against when you subject these doctrines and dogmas to the critique of critical thinking. Let's read that.
Dogmas and creeds generally, however, are as much a source of evil as of good, because in them the guiding vision is clouded owing to degeneration or suspension of critical thinking. If allegiance to creeds and dogmas has sometimes done good to the individual or to the community to which he belongs, it has more often done harm. Though the mind and heart are involved in allegiance to dogmas and creeds, both function in such case under the serious handicap of suspension of thought. Hence, dogmas and creeds do not contribute to unmixed good.
Now, in the case of, let's say, a fanaticism of one sort or another, I can see how the heart would be given a certain kind of scope in something like that. And of course, the mind is given a certain kind of food in the case of a doctrine that you believe in. Okay, that all makes sense. Now, I can also see how adherence to that in a fanatical way would entail a vitiation of the understanding, because you're having to believe a creed that really can't sustain critical inquiry. Why would the heart be vitiated, as he says here?
Heart be what?
In a fanatical adherence, why is your heart compromised or vitiated? Your heart is engaged, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm a fanatical adherent of some religious sect. Well, my heart is being given a passionate belief. It's good so far as it goes.
But in support of that dogma and creeds that you carry,
Yeah.
the heart functions, that the heart follows your dogma and creeds, doesn't,
Right. So, I could say that the dogma and creed are too limited and restricted. The intellectual construct is inadequate. But why isn't the heart okay?
Well, it's not sensing true values. It's not like, well,
Yeah.
so it's basically handicapped.
Yeah, truth and values is certainly vitiated. And it would seem to me that because of that, it provides a cover for all the impurities of the heart to come up too. Like, let's suppose I'm passionate adherent of my religion. Okay, well, probably at the core of the religion is a divine truth. All the religions would have that, I feel. But that part may be good. But in the course of doing that, I may sort of damn and condemn everyone who holds a different belief than mine. Okay, well, what kind of heart is that? That's intolerance. That's hatred. That's, all the greed, all these evil things. So the impurities of the heart are unleashed too. The heart is the heart is also the seat of all sorts of garbage. Lust, greed, anger, all the impurities of the heart are there too. So because it's not a clear channel, all bad heart comes into play at the same time. So this is the thing about this whole stage of the process that he was talking about. The heart and mind can be captured, that's true, but both mind and heart are vitiated to a certain extent. Yeah.
Well, it also seems to me it's a very heightened situation of self-assertion, of individuality assertion.
Right. What we were talking about earlier.
I'm right.
That's right.
I bought into this doctrine, and it's right. Therefore, I'm right.
Yeah, that's right.
And therefore, I'm righteous.
Yeah.
And it's a narrowing. It's like a tunnel vision, and a narrowing of experience and of openness to thought, to the feeling, to heart.
And it could create the delusion that I'm not being selfish and egotistical because it's not me, it's my faith, it's my truth. I associate it with something grand and beyond myself. But in fact, it's the I, my, me, mine, the my identification with it that feeds my ego. It's like another trick of the ego.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You tell us about it.
Remind me, didn't you talk about the seed of individuality being associated with the heart?
Yeah, it looks like to me. The seed of individuality in the sanskaras, yeah. So if this connection is true, I was just speculating that. If you want to look at it in the lower aspect, it's the ego. Seed of individuality plus sanskaras is ego in the chart. But in the higher aspect, if this connection is true, it's heart. So for heart to become pure, it has to be purified of all those sanskaras and all those narrowness and all that egoism. Egoism is a direct compromising of the heart. If that is true, I'm putting a big if there. I'm making this connection from all these different things we've looked at. Yeah.
So can it lead that purification of heart has to go through its impurity, like a natural process of shari'at to tariqat? I mean, is this a natural evolutionary process?
The purification of heart. In that passage we read from 3 Incredible Weeks, the very beginning part of that we read was that all the religions emphasize the purification of the heart.
Yeah.
The heart is just not automatically good and great and wonderful. It has to be purified, in fact. And this stage seems to me to give a lot of scope to the impure heart.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Emotions are not necessarily good. They give expression and outlet to the feelings. Okay? Last night, I don't know, for some reason I'm on a kick of listening to Beethoven. So I was listening to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Boy, there are a lot of feelings there, and they are wonderful. The most wonderful feelings. But, on the other hand, there are a lot of feelings that are really, really terrible. And Adolf Hitler, for example, there was some strong feeling, right? He certainly could awaken the feelings. Look at what he did with it, yeah.
Can you differentiate feelings and emotions?
Yeah, I know, I was going to bring that up earlier, and I'm not sure I could.
It seems like
I wonder.
feeling is an emotion, and then a feeling is a desire, but I thought a desire was an emotion. It's somehow in a different column or something.
So we have 3 terms there, and I agree that they're all related. Feeling, emotion, and desire. I don't completely have an answer to this. I'd be interested in what you
emotions was used as a subset of feelings. It seems to me that maybe feelings are sort of a spontaneous type of thing, whereas an emotion is sort of a named emotional state that you can actually pinpoint, whereas the feeling is more the eruption itself.
Yes. I tend to think of
One is
feeling
continuous.
as something that's of a higher order, and emotions would be the coloration of feeling
Oh, yeah.
under the influence of a desire or something like that. I don't know if that's true or not. But he says that the sixth plane is the plane of feelings, not the plane of emotions. And he gives emotions, as you say, as a subset. So I tend to think an emotion is a feeling subjected. Okay, like, I'm 16 years old, and there's a real cute girl there. And there's a feeling of love, but it gets all caught up in, lust, too. So that whole emotion would be the feeling with all the other stuff that gets poured on top of it. That's what I tend to think, but I'm not entirely sure. What do you think, Ron, about that?
I'm just thinking you can have a bad feeling about something that's not really an emotional state. That could just be a spontaneous
Mm-hmm. So it's prior, or it's more immediate, or it's right from the whim,
right.
so to speak.
Well,
That makes sense.
emotion, in your example just now, it sounded as if emotion was the expression of the feeling. I mean, to emote is an action, so that's an emotion. So, describe the feeling as like a combination of love and lust.
Yeah.
Or that's the feelings and the emotions, a combination of that.
Maybe an externalization or an expression moving up towards the sphere of action.
Yeah, and we
Comes
have
out
our
there.
feelings and then we have our desires.
Yeah.
They come together and create emotion.
It's interesting, in God Speaks, Baba talked about thoughts, feelings, and desires. And now get this, desires are the highest aspect of the mind. Isn't that funny?
The highest one.
Are the highest aspect of mind. So there's kind of a bit of surprise. Yeah, I don't know quite what to do with all these things. One thing about desire is it seems to me that it's rooted in the whim. Because the whim is the first desire. And I think the whim is the root of every desire, actually. But the reason that I desire this or that I desire that is that whim is in ignorance, and it's associating what it wants with something that's a false image. We talked last week about false gods, right? To me, these are false gods. That the whim actually is asking, who am I, and is seeking God. And everything you desire short of that, to me, is a false god. I interpret the Ten Commandments that way. But these are really good questions. If you have any further thoughts about them in the future, I'd love to hear about them. Feelings, desires, emotions, what is the relation?
And ultimately, the desire for union, or to be reunited with the soul. So I can see how desire, from that point of view, is highest function, because that's what drives.
If you want to see desire in its higher form, look at highest form. Look at Mira. Look at her desire. But she adored Baba and wanted nothing except for everything. What do you say about what she wanted? She really didn't want anything for herself, but she adored, and there's no words for it. That's what desire is when it discovers itself. That's the truest, highest form of desire. These are good questions about what the feeling function serves. Let's read on some more. So this is actually, this discourse is really talking about the mind and the heart and their moments and their roles in the course of development towards the inner life.
Somebody else want to read?
I'm another reader. Anybody?
Where we read?
From when a person gives up.
When a person gives up uncritically accepted dogmas and creeds in favor of views and doctrines to which he has devoted thoughts, there is a certain amount of advance insofar as his mind has now begun to think and critically examine its beliefs. Very often, however, the newly held beliefs are seen to lack the fervor and enthusiasm which characterized allegiance to dogmas and creeds.
Now, I think this is a great statement about what happens. So often, I found in my own life, and I see in others, you criticize some belief system you've got, and it's all cool for a while. But after a length of time, it becomes empty, or vapid, or unsatisfying, or you can't really get a lot of fervor for it.
Yeah.
Haven't you found that so?
Yeah.
Certainly did. Okay.
As these newly held beliefs lack motive power, they belong only to the superficial aspect of life, and they hang loosely upon the person like an ocean. The mind has been emancipated from the domination of uncultured emotion.
Isn't that it? Oh, there's an emotion word. Uncultured emotion. Sorry.
Uncultured emotion.
Did I, sorry, I lost my...
Yeah,
Here we are. Domination of uncultured emotion. So emotion needs to be cultured, huh? Hey, you gotta get culture. Yeah.
But this is often achieved by sacrificing the cooperation of the heart. If the results of critical thought are to be spiritually fruitful, they must again invade and recapture the heart so as to enlist its cooperative functioning.
Now take a look at that. Isn't that quite a
I'm sorry, can you read again from the mind?
Yeah.
Well, if you were listening,
Actually, reading fast.
You were talking.
So,
I slowed down for you, Lana, because I know how you like it when I fast.
Oh,
The mind has, you weren't listening. The mind has been emancipated from the domination of uncultured emotion, but this is often achieved by sacrificing the cooperation of the heart. If the results of critical thought are to be spiritually fruitful, they must again invade and recapture the heart so as to enlist its cooperative functioning.
I find that expression to be really interesting. The results, they need to invade and recapture the heart. Wow. So, what do you think that means? I mean, I'm sort of puzzling on it myself.
I think it's just alluding to what you said before about putting your mind, head, and heart together. So that's like perfection. You know, it's not just one. Too much head, too much heart.
Right.
You have to put together.
And it can't be side by side.
Yes.
They're
together. Yeah.
It has to be mixed in together.
Yeah. We've been talking here in this whole last page and a half about bringing critical thinking, critical thought to bear on creeds and dogmas and all that sort of stuff. So from that standpoint of critical thought, the thought has to actively enter into the heart and try to win it over. It's kind of beautiful, actually.
Isn't the thought what is the mind? I kind of see it as a transformation of mind. Because from there, when it says the mind has been emancipated from the domination of uncultured emotion,
Yeah.
but this is often achieved by sacrificing the cooperation of the heart.
Yeah.
So the mind is no longer at its place of
Right.
catering to the uncultured emotion and
Right.
wandering around.
Right.
Now he's tapping to where the heart is.
Yes. Yes.
It seems to get another life.
Uh-huh.
If there is all
I think of critical thought as an activity proceeding out of the mind, in a sense.
Yes.
So the mind has to free itself from the uncultured emotion, and I would say this, of bad heart,
Yes.
of impure heart. You know, you may be part of a movement that is really 50% predicated on, let's say I'm a fanatical patriot. Okay, I'll get out of the present time. I'll go back to 15th century England, because nobody will care all that much about that. I don't know. Okay, Shakespeare's plays, and those damn French, man, they stink with pounded pudding out of them. Okay, so you know there is a passionate feeling for your own country, love for your own country. That's good so far as it goes, but there is the hatred and scorn and contempt for the French, who are you know these contemptible people. So there's all this uncultured emotion, and critical thinking says there's a universality here. The human form is the form of God. All people are the embodiment of God. I'm not going to go piss on the French anymore. Okay. So I freed myself from that. So far, so good. But then there's this passionate feeling of patriotism in my country, and I'm not really attuned to it, and I feel at a loss. I've lost that sense of passion. I've lost that sense of urgency. That's what he talks about. You've lost the cooperation of the heart. So you have to enter into again from that place of critical thinking and recapture that greater love. Whatever love it is that causes everybody else to love my nation of England is based on a love of humanity, say, or a love of God. And to recapture that like a St. Francis would, where he wouldn't give a damn if you were an Italian or a Spaniard or a wolf, any of them, you know. You have to universalize it. So bringing the activity of mind where the whole heart is brought back into the picture. This is such a beautiful description of mind and heart in the process of spiritual awakening and how that works to free you from conventionalities of society.
So what does it mean by, so when it gets there, invade and recapture, then Baba says to enlist its cooperative functioning.
Yes.
What does he mean by that, enlist its cooperative functioning? You mean enlist what, parts?
Yeah.
Parts, okay.
Yeah. And recapture it. Invade may seem like a militaristic term, but I don't think, I think the sense is like, almost like to woo and win. It's like that. To win it over by, you know, you approach the heart, you know, and the heart says, yeah, I kind of like that. You know, the heart is won over because you've given it an offer that gives such scope to the heart that the scope is willing to cooperate with the mind. So this is, again, a beautiful use of the mind. How to make the mind a thing of beauty like that, by recapturing the heart. I love that phrase. It's such a surprising expression of the idea. So, okay, let's keep going. Want to keep going, Con?
Okay, sure. In other words, the ideas which have been accepted after critical examination must again be released into active life if they are to yield very fruitful benefit.
Now, this point he brought up earlier, and it's being correlated with this. To invade and recapture seems to have something to do with the active expression of them in active life. You have to bring them to life. That's how you invade and recapture the heart. This is an insistent theme of Baba's throughout the discourses. You have to do it. You have to put it into practice.
In the process of practical life, they often undergo a healthy transformation and become more soundly interwoven with the very fabric of life.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Very nice. I think that may be enough. Okay. So here he reviews it. Okay, let's read it because this is right on our topic. Read this last paragraph. Another reader? This is a summary of the whole thing.
I can read it. The transition from external conformity, such as Shariat or Karma Kanda, to the life of inner realities, such as Tariqat or Moshka Marga, involves two steps. One, freeing the mind from the inertia of uncritical acceptance based upon blind imitation and steering it to critical thinking. And two, bringing the result of critical and discriminative thinking into practical life. In order to be spiritually fruitful, thinking must be not only critical, but creative.
So he seems to associate that kind of thinking that enlists the cooperation of the heart as being creative. That word has come up now.
A cooperation of the heart looks like it makes it creative.
That's right.
Right?
It's the
like what
the
is
heart's
invading.
Yes.
Yeah. Critical and creative thinking leads to a spiritual preparation by cultivating those qualities which contribute towards the perfection and balancing of the mind and the heart and the release of unfettered divine life.
Yeah.
We're getting there, right?
Yeah. So here we have a statement of the proper relation between the mind and the heart. And it's a full creative cooperative enterprise where both of them take part. And what's distinctive about this discourse is it shows the process of a development from, and I love this word, inertia. The inertia of uncritical acceptance based on blind imitation. That's kind of the baseline state of most people. You just accept the basic premises and beliefs of the people around you. So the first role that it seems like the critical thinking has the first role to play in this by critiquing, discriminating true from false. But then it has to bring about the cooperation, enlist the cooperation of the heart by bringing it into practical life expression. And that's creative thinking. So critical thinking has to lead to this creative thinking. So this is a beautiful discourse, actually, pertaining to this topic of heart and head. And the other discourse most related to heart and head is the avenues of understanding. Yeah, here we go. I'm not going to take the time to go over life of the spirit, but that one is very germane to this too. And Baba there, I mentioned earlier, but Baba talks about spirit and matter. And I don't know if you're familiar with the name René Descartes. Any of you know René Descartes?
Yes.
He's one of the famous philosophers of the West, Frenchman, and lived in the 1600s. And he's attributed with the spirit-matter dichotomy, formulating that in a new way, where there are two essential realities, matter and spirit. And that's the problem that Baba takes up here. And he seems to associate the functioning of mind with matter, or the material sphere, and the functioning of heart with spirit. And he seems to make that correlation there. And his point, the central point, is that that the mind and the categories and understandings created by the mind are based on its experience of the material sphere. Material science comes to mind as an example of this. And it's absolutely inadequate as an approach for the heart. You cannot approach the heart through an understanding based on the outer world, the matter. Heart is the approach, is the faculty directly related to the spirit, and is the proper instrument to use in the exploring of the spirit. But on the other hand, Baba says, that should not entail a rejection of the material sphere at all. But rather, the material should be used as an instrument for the expression of the heart. So he develops that theme in many ways and very beautifully. But this takes up some of the same themes. And let's see what parts of this. I want to be sure we get to the end of it. We were about 10 after 4, quarter after 4, so we have about another 20 minutes or so, something like that. Let's see. Okay, I'll just read little bits of this. The different avenues which lead to spiritual understanding can be understood best through an initial distinction between spirit and matter. This is going back to the topic of that discourse, the life of the spirit. In order to understand matter, we have material means, and in order to understand the spirit, we have spiritual means. Matter is understood through the mind, with the intellect working upon data given through different senses. But spirit can be understood only through spirit itself. This highest form of understanding in which the spirit enjoys self-knowledge without using any instrument or medium is very rare and most difficult to attain. This looks like God realization, doesn't it? I'd say it's difficult to attain. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, oh yeah. But I don't want that, I wanna be with the God man.
All right, okay. You can have that.
So don't give me that today, okay? Because I'm gonna incarnate when he's back.
Okay. You don't want to sort of check out too soon.
No, don't give me
That's
that.
his mukti.
The best approach for understanding the spirit is through the heart and not through the mind. So this is probably the discourse most relating to heart and mind matters. Let's see what else we should look at. Okay, why don't we have a conflict between heart and mind? We have a reader of this. Margaret?
As contrasted with the method of the mind, which has its foundation in sensations, and which proceeds through inference and proofs to conclusions, there is the more direct method of the heart, which intuitively grasps the values that are progressively realized in the life of man as he goes through the diverse experiences of the world, and as his attention is centered on arriving at spiritual understanding.
Now I notice the word intuitively does come up here, doesn't it? So there does seem to be an association between the direct method of the heart and the intuitive faculty. So those are connected by Baba in various places. Also, that word manas I mentioned earlier, with the senses and the intellect working on them that forms constructs and an understanding of the external environment. That does seem to be mind as he's using it here. Do you agree? Yes. It's the outer part of the mind that's looking at the empirical sphere and relating itself to it. And the heart would be the inner side, which is more like Ron, you were saying about feelings directly arising immediately. I think them directly arising from the wind, even something like that. It seemed to me the heart is the faculty which immediately feels that, and thus is more responsive to the spirit. What do you think? Does that sound true about heart? Yeah. Okay, keep going.
In the life of most persons, the mind and the heart are at loggerheads, and the conflict between the two creates confusion. The heart, which in its own way feels the unity of life, wants to fulfill itself through a life of love, sacrifice, and service. It is keen about giving instead of taking. It derives its driving power from the inmost psychic urge, expressing itself through the immediate intuitions of the inner life.
Once again, the word intuition comes up here. Baba seems to be talking here, by the way, about a purified heart, a higher heart, not sort of a heart tainted, full of lust, greed, anger, and those things.
It does not care for the proofs or intellectual corroborations which the mind seeks while dealing with material objects. In its objective handling of the material world, mind is saturated with experiences of multiplicity and separateness, and therefore it feeds the egocentric tendencies which divide man from man and make him selfish and possessive. But the heart, feeling in its inner experiences the glow of love, has glimpses of the unity of the spirit, and therefore seeks expression through self-giving tendencies which unite man with man and make him selfless and generous. Therefore, there is necessarily a conflict between the inner voice and the deliverances of the intellect, which are based upon the apparent and superficial aspects of life.
Yeah, so Lois, you were talking earlier about the inner voice. And this does seem to associate it with the heart. Looks like to me. Again,
Don Stevens used to talk about this, I remember, when he would talk about intuition.
Yes.
Conflict between inner voice and the deliverance of the intellect. Because he said, oftentimes we think this is that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? Mind and heart at loggerheads. Do you find that to be true in your lives?
What does loggerhead mean?
Loggerheads, clash, direct conflict.
Okay.
You think, Debbie?
I think it's a constant, because the heart doesn't separate or judge or criticize, and I think I'm constantly, unconsciously and consciously judging and discriminating in every situation I'm in, and some of it, of course, is necessary, right? But but in terms of our interactions with others, we're constantly analyzing what people look like, what they wear, what they must be doing. We compare it to ourselves, we compare it to people on TV. So that would be, the mind being focused in, the empirical world, in the world in a way that, it's too noisy. So when the mind is less noisy, then the heart is not focused so much on those kind of things, but I think it's kind of like an automatic thing that we do all the time. So it's like silencing that. So loggerheads would be that we all have good intentions, from our heart, for being with Baba, for having this grace and love and working toward mastery of self. And so that's the higher part of who we are at loggerheads with the reactive mind.
Yeah.
I would say, for me anyway.
Yeah, one of the challenges, we were, in the last discourse, looking at the essential role which critical thinking can play and needs to play. So let's suppose I'm growing up in a community, I'll go back to 15th century England again, where they're all fired up against the lousy French. Okay, and I'm all full of that feeling, and then I get to a certain age where I start to look at things myself, and I say, all this, chauvinism is really, they're damning the French for things that they do themselves. What hypocrisy this is based on. Okay, so far so good. My critical thinking has helped me to dissociate from the uncultured emotion of, contempt for the French. But what if at that point I start to be very contemptuous of my fellow citizens, thinking what jerks they are. Here you are looking down on the French, and what a jerk you are yourself. Okay, well now I'm starting to do that very same thing I'm condemning, like the judging, Debbie, you're talking about. So it seems like one of the tasks is to know when to stop. If you're going to use critical thinking, to use it for its proper task and then put the tool down. It's like if you've got a nail to hammer in. Once you've hammered it in, put down the hammer. So that's one part of where the mind keeps going long after its proper job has been fulfilled and doesn't stop. That puts the mind and heart at loggerheads.
Which also goes along with forgiveness. I mean, how long do we all hold on to? I'll speak for myself, but I am inclined to have, a tendency to hold on to angers toward someone or situations that hurt me from the past instead of resolving them. You know about them, Michael. We treat people for this all the time, where you have to learn to come to grips with it or see it a certain way and then let it go. Because Baba says the past is frozen, and the now only exists. But that's a statement, and that has to be experiential. So, but as long as don't you think it's about if we have an awareness, and Baba's about awakening, not to teach but to awaken. If we are awakening and we are being taking our own inventory, then that's when we can start the work.
Yeah.
I mean, right? I mean, how else can we even do it if we don't see ourselves doing it, right? The Bible says it'll help us. That's the other thing.
Now, one of the things that Baba wants to talk about here, and I found this to be rather interesting, is the mind and heart and the roles they play in evaluating the master or evaluating him. And this is one of the distinctive features of this discourse. It's one of the comparatively few in which Baba speaks in the first person. He does once in a while, but not very often in the discourses, but he does a good bit here. So here, mind craves assurance or conviction. So how the mind wants to have its faith supported by corroborations. That's a big focus of this discourse. And it comes up in many little ways, like, if I'm talking about Baba to people who don't know about him, I'd love to be able to find a nice corroboration or a story of someone who came to Baba and their life improved, or things like that. And I'm not going to tell the story about somebody who came to Baba and then nothing but disasters befell them for 10 years, even though there are plenty of stories like that, because my mind wants to corroborate by impressing that person about how great Baba is. Whereas if my faith is 100% solid, why would I want to get recruits to him? I mean, I would want to share Baba for that person's sake, but not to build up myself. So that's the kind of thing he's talking about here. I'll just read a little bit of this. When the mind encroaches upon the province of the heart, that's really his theme for a lot of this discourse, it does so by requiring assurance or conviction as a precedent condition that must be fulfilled before there is a release of love. I gotta know that you deserve it before I'm gonna love you, right? But love is nothing if it is not spontaneous. It cannot be a conclusion of reasoning. It is not a fruit of the spirit of bargain. If you want to be certain about the object of love before you're giving your love, it is only a form of calculating selfishness. Boy, isn't human love full of this?
That's right.
You actually want to love, but sort of like, I want to be sure I get my percentage out of this deal.
And I don't want to be hurt.
I don't want to be hurt, right? That's right. I don't want to just love you because you might hurt me. But, the true lover just jumps into the ocean. It's not easy to do. Many persons, for example, want to be convinced of my divinity in order to be able to love me. So Bob is speaking in his own voice here. That is to say, they want me to give them objective proofs of my spiritual status by performing miracles.
Yeah.
This was one of the things that people kept bugging Baba with this his whole life long. Conviction of this type is often a hindrance rather than a help in releasing the highest form of love. Why would it, let's suppose, you want Baba to prove who he is by doing a miracle, and let's suppose he does do a miracle for you. Why, just to imaginatively explore this, why might that not in the long run hurt more than help?
You would have to see if it weren't true.
Well,
Yeah, that's right, I have to check it out. I might at the moment be extraordinarily impressed.
But that doesn't.
Yeah.
That doesn't take care of the root of it. That just you have the momentary maybe reaction to it, but then it's just going to come back out in some other form.
Absolutely.
Another way to prove it another way.
Yeah. So for 6 months or a year, I'm absolutely delighted and I tell everyone I know. But the problem is that there were cravings in me that made me crave the miracle in the first place. And then I'll want another miracle. Or I'll want something else. If it's not this, the mind is like this, it's never satisfied. It will not solve the problem because it's only a desire that's been fulfilled.
It's a conditional love.
Yeah.
You do miracle for me, I believe in you.
Right.
Like the spirit of bargain.
Sure. And then when the bargain, once I'm sick of that bargain, I'll want to do another bargain. You're never satisfied. Desires are never satisfied. They never stop, no matter what they are. And this is just a desire. So, like if Baba had done miracles when he came to the West, he would have had a gazillion followers. And lots of people would have followed him because they were curious about miracles and maybe wanted to do them themselves. Or maybe the military would start to study it to see if there's some better way of delivering bombs. It would go on and on and on. There'd be no end to it.
They would come for the miracles and not for God.
That's right.
It's like going out with somebody for their bank account.
It is. And I personally think one of the reasons why Baba did this Hollywood Bowl thing was precisely for this. Because I bet you his disciples were true disciples. The gang he gathered. But surely they had impurities of their heart. Like if I were with Baba, and you love Baba and you adore Baba and you want to be with him, but it's kind of nice when Hollywood goes in for him too. It's isn't he wonderful? But I'm kind of close to it, Yeah, Baba would want you to do this, and he wouldn't. In other words, I'm getting a cut out of it, out of the deal. So what's the best way to purge me of that? To create a situation where everybody says, you're a follower of that fraud? Haven't you grown beyond that? You must be an idiot. And then I'm purged of all those desires. I feel sure that's one of the reasons why Baba did that. He was purging the hearts. He was cleaning the hearts of his disciples. And he was getting rid of people whose work he had completed with. They had done their connection was fulfilled and they were going to do his work.
What about all those times he said he was going to break his silence?
Another beautiful example of
he
that.
He would announce to the world.
That's right. And it'd be so humiliating to his followers, How can he be God in human form when he doesn't even know his own mind?
Some people left him because of
they did. So this, I think, is part of his method of working to purify the heart of those who love him, where you follow him for the sake of love and not for any other reason. Actually, I've thought about this a lot. I think Baba, in his working with his lovers today, the most important thing to him, ridiculous how good I know this, but is actually to get some real love out of us. So he doesn't bribe us. Or if he does bribe us, it's only just a little. And then after you've had your bribe, you get the kick a year or two later. Like Baba, oh boy, isn't he a wonderful person? Isn't he great? 5 years later, what a jackass. What a jerk. You get all of that within the Baba world.
That's the honeymoon time.
Honeymoon
You heard about Baba and it's a honeymoon.
Yeah. So I think he was really working with all of this stuff. I want to be sure we get to the last page where he really gets to the heart of it.
I don't know, what's our time frame? What?
We started about, let's go another 5 or 10 minutes. We started a little bit late.
That sounds right.
We're pretty close to the end of this. The main thing I want to do is get to this last page where he really restates in the most succinct form of a lot of what we were talking about. Yeah, so we won't read it, but intellectual conviction hinders spontaneous love. It actually hinders. And this must be different than the kind of conviction that Adi Kearani was talking about when he said, conviction is God realization in disguise. I think he's talking about something of a higher order. There's a kind of a... Anyway, I could talk about that. There's something in God Speaks where he talks about levels of certainty. But, let's see. I'm sorry, let me just be sure I know where we are. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't have the time to review things right before the session. I don't know if everything was... Yeah. Okay. So now, here is his fullest statement on the matter of harmony of of mind and heart. By the way, in the fullest statement on this topic that I know about, Baba talking about life on other planets, there are 18,000 planets with human life. He said the vast majority of them have a huge predominance of mind over heart. There is a very small number, he said, in which there's a huge proportion of heart over mind. But the distinctive characteristic of the earth is that they are in balance. Elsewhere, he indicated that musts may be beings of heart, but their mind is not, has been stunned or is not functioning properly. And thus, they are not able to function and serve to the extent that they could. And to really progress on the path and to really serve, the best state is a balance of the two. And now he's going to define what that means. Let's see, we have a reader of this. Conditions of securing harmony between mind and heart.
Between the two extremes of a life harassed by wants and a life which is completely free from wants, it is possible to arrive at a mode of practical life in which there is harmony between the mind and the heart.
By the way, a life completely free from wants would mean realization of God. So he's saying, if, this is between the external life of being a slave to your desires and realization. So on the journey between those two, the practical life entails a harmony between mind and heart. Okay.
When there is such harmony, the mind does not dictate the ends of life, but only helps to realize those ends which are given by the heart.
What are ends? Goals, purposes. It doesn't determine what you're seeking, but helps on how to attain them.
It does not lay down any conditions to be fulfilled before any utterance of the heart is adopted for translation into practical life. In other words, it surrenders its role of judge, which it is accustomed to play in its intellectual queries concerning the nature of the universe, and accepts unquestioningly the dictates of the heart.
That's a big one, isn't it? The mind is no longer the judge. It seems like intuition plays a role here, where the mind intuitively knows what true values are, what true ends are, and accepts them. So that when the mind is working as it should, it knows when to shut up. It knows this is a deeper truth and I accept it. I don't poke at it. It knows where to poke and where not to poke. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going on this. Want to keep going, Lois, or how is it too small?
It's okay right now. The mind is the treasure house of learning, but the heart is the treasure house of spiritual wisdom.
That's a great one, isn't it? Yeah. Treasure house of learning, the treasure house of spiritual wisdom.
Even the term's great, the treasure house. You know what I mean?
It makes them both look kind of nice. Yeah. In their highest aspects, actually it makes the mind look a little better than it's been looking to a lot of this discourse. It has the capacity to be a treasure house of learning if it accepts the higher promptings of the heart.
That's right. The so-called conflict between religion and science arises only when there is no appreciation of the relative importance of these two types of knowledge.
And by the way, this is a big topic in the Discourse on the New Humanity 2. It talks about the role of science in the future civilization.
It is futile to try to glean knowledge of true values by exercise of the mind alone. Mind cannot tell you which things are worth having. It can only tell you how to achieve the ends accepted from non-intellectual sources. In most persons, the mind accepts ends from the promptings of wants. This means denial of the life of the spirit.
So here we have desires again. If you don't accept, if the mind does not accept its goals, its purposes, its values from the higher promptings of the heart, what it will actually do is accept them from desires. That's actually what will run your mind. If love of the heart does not run your mind, don't kid yourself. Your desires will. That's the real. You're talking about freedom earlier, right? What this so-called freedom means is that your desires are in the driver's seat. That's the real choice we got. Yeah.
Only when the mind accepts its ends and values from the deepest promptings of the heart does it contribute to the life of the spirit. Thus, mind has to work in cooperation with the heart. Factual knowledge has to be subordinated to intuitive perceptions.
Here we get that word intuitive again.
And heart has to be allowed full freedom in determining the ends of life without any interference from the mind. The mind has a place in practical life, but its role begins after the heart has had its say.
Another great sentence there.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. Okay, and I think this is the last paragraph. This is, I think, the best statement on how the mind and the heart should interrelate to each other. Anyone want to take us home here?
Spiritual understanding is born of harmony between mind and heart. The harmony of mind and heart does not require the mixing up of their functions.
Now this is really neat. I really like this. Yeah. It's not like you just sort of scramble them or alternate them or do, okay, mind you've had, heart you've had this, mind's turn. Mind you've had this, heart's turn. It's nothing like that.
It does not imply cross-functioning, but cooperative functioning. Their functions are neither identical nor coordinate. Mind and heart must be, of course, balanced, but this balance cannot be secured by pitching the mind against the heart, by pitching the heart against the mind. It can be attained not through mechanical tension, but through intelligent adjustment. Mind and heart may be said to be balanced when they serve their proper purpose and when they perform their respective functions without erring this way or that. It is only when they are so balanced that there can be true harmony between them. Such harmony of mind and heart is the most important condition of the integral, undivided life of spiritual understanding.
Notice spiritual understanding here seems to mean something more than just the intellect, actually. In Hinduism, the word buddhi is sometimes taken to mean something like mind-heart. And I think we need a word like that in English, mind-heart. When Baba talks about spiritual understanding in discourses, I think he means mind-heart. And they're an illuminated perception that originates in the heart and is filled out and clarified by the workings of the critical intellect that is performing its function and accepting the root value given to it by the heart. That's what spiritual understanding is in the discourses. It's not a thing of the intellect alone. So, with that, maybe we could wrap it up for the day. And the last of these sessions will be tomorrow. Any last thing you want to bring up or question to raise before we close?
What time tomorrow?
10:30. 10:30 to 12:30. And we'll have to end right at 12:30 because we have a play to do in the afternoon.
Can you please say what the subject is for tomorrow? I didn't.
It's called Love in the Divinization of Daily Life. This is talking about the path of love. And one of the things I was going to do actually was to look at some song lyrics.
Yes, very nice. Very nice.
Begin the beginning and some other things. Okay.
DJ.